Thank you, Myron, and once again, delight to be with you. I know some of you have been with us the last couple nights. Others of you are here just this weekend and for the final part of this series on hearing voices. So I'm going to give you a little bit of sense as to where we've been, because this whole issue of hearing voices is, I believe these days, one of the great challenges of the life of faith. We live in a world where we must learn how to navigate the voices. And the voices are many, they're varied, they come at us every single day. Without fail, we are receiving, it is estimated, thousands of messages every day, often in very subtle ways, in some ways not so subtle. And this matter of voices is a spiritual discipline that we must come to grips with. And we've been talking about this over the last several evenings, and this morning we're going to dive into John 10 in a few moments. But I want to give you a little bit of a ramp up to the passage in John chapter 10 where Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd, and my sheep know me, and my sheep listen to my voice. They hear my voice. They follow me." I want to remind you that we all live in a field of influence. And for those of you who have been here, this will be a little bit of review. But the field of influence in which we live, this is your life. We live in a field of influence where we have multiple voices that come into our lives from the very earliest days. When our ears are able to hear, we hear the voice of our family. We grow up and we hear people who are critics, people who have things to say that often are like barbs in our soul. The enemy himself, the enemy of faith, is, we're told in Scripture, the accuser of the brethren. He is also, according to Jesus in John 8, a liar and the father of all lies. So the enemy himself has a very subtle and at times not so subtle ways of using the matter of voices to communicate to us all kinds of lies. Jump over to the peanut gallery. The peanut gallery is that group of people who engage in what we call the drive-by shoutings of life. Not drive-by shootings, but drive-by shoutings. These are all the things we hear on a day-by-day basis from people in the office, in the school. We hear it through the media, radio, all kinds of different things. There's all kinds of people in the peanut gallery. We have friends, and we hear the voices of friends. Sometimes the voices of our friends truly are echoes of the Father's voice. They are a voice of love and encouragement and affirmation and challenge. But at other times our friends voice things that actually distract us, derail us, and can discourage us. We also have our culture and our world. And these days, the voices of our culture and world are magnified because of technology. And so we live in this world of distraction that is reaching addictive proportions. Often the media and culture and the world communicate messages that are very deceptive. They're not in keeping with truth. And so our culture and world is voicing at us constantly. These voices can become inner voices. We can internalize these voices. And this becomes the internal dialogue that we carry on day by day. And often we are replaying the sentences that we hear. For some of us, they become life sentences. They become the script that we follow. And these inner voices need to be surrendered and submitted, I believe, day by day to the Good Shepherd. So in our field of influence, we also, as people of faith in the Lord Jesus, would acknowledge that we have a Good Shepherd, the Lord Jesus, who has promised us, "I'll be with you. I am with you to the very end of the age, to the end of the world, wherever you may be, I'm with you." And so we acknowledge in our field of influence, the Good Shepherd is present. The challenge, however, is that often his voice is faint. Or perhaps we view the voice of the Good Shepherd as one voice among many voices, and it's good to have the voice of the Good Shepherd, but we have not learned how to make that voice a primary voice that in fact helps us with all the other voices. So, Jesus in Matthew chapter 11 invites us to come and learn from him. And to come and learn from him, we learn from Jesus many things. But I believe one of the really important things we learn from Jesus is Jesus says, "Come and learn from me about how to navigate this field of influence and the voices of life. I'm not a high priest," Hebrews 4:15, "who is unable to sympathize with your weaknesses. I've been tempted," the writer of Hebrews says, Jesus has been tempted in every way like we are. And he's been tempted to deal with voices like we're tempted to deal with voices. Because Jesus heard voices. But Jesus did not allow those voices to crowd out the dominant primary voice of the Father. And this is what we learn from Jesus. We learn the way of Jesus. The next screen communicates this idea that Jesus also lived in a field of influence. This is why Jesus says to us, I know voices. I know what it is that you're dealing with, because I heard voices from my family, often very negative and harsh voices. I heard voices from enemies. In fact, Jesus heard voices from the critic corral, from enemies, at a volume and intensity that I think none of us have ever heard, or perhaps ever will hear, but he heard the voices of enemies. He heard the enemy's voice, which was the lie once again. Jesus, you can realize your kingdom by simply being relevant, powerful, popular. There's an easier way, Jesus, for you to establish your kingdom. Follow my way. And Jesus said, no, I'm not going to live by your voice. I'm only going to live by the voice of the Father. I will not choose an easier way. So he heard the voice of the enemy. He also heard the voice of crowds, sometimes adoring him, at other times antagonistic and hateful. And we pointed out last night that people were amazed by Jesus because he was not swayed by people. He was not taken off course by people. In fact, he paid no attention really to what they were saying, though he heard the voice of the crowds. He also had friends who sometimes voiced words of encouragement and affirmation and support, but more often than not, his friends were voicing words that in one case he had to say to Peter, Peter, you need to realize that you're voicing the words that are not sourced in God, but sourced in hell. Jesus heard words. He also heard words from his culture and world. He lived in a world of isms, all kinds of philosophies and religions and mindsets and worldviews, and he heard all of it. But for Jesus, when he says, come and learn from me, he's saying, learn from me that in my navigating through life, it was the Father's voice that I determined I was going to hear dominantly, primarily, and I was going to tune my ear day by day to what it is my Father said to me and about me and for me. That I was his beloved, I was his beloved son, and it's his will that mattered, it's his way that mattered. And in that primary relationship, Jesus shows us the way of a spine of identity that is rooted in our relationship with the one who has created us. Now, Jesus was not created by the Father, he is eternal, but in his relationship to the Father, he shows us a way of relating to God, and he then invites us to realize that he is our good shepherd, now invites us to establish the same spine of identity. Let's go to the next screen. Our life in our field of influence, we ask the question, and we're asking the question, what difference would it make in your life and in my life if as we lived in this field of influence, we were to learn what it means to day by day learn to listen to the voice of our good shepherd primarily, and allow that voice, that dominant voice, to be the voice that helps us navigate all the other voices. So that when you sit here even this weekend, and some of you I know can pull up in your memory banks, you can go into your brain attic and you can open up the files and the trunks, and you can remember the words said to you and about you many, many years ago by family members, maybe a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister or an aunt or an uncle, and you pull that memory record up and you can play the tape. You can hear the words of what was said. And those words have been with you. What does it mean, and what difference would it make for us to learn in those moments where the replay happens to say, Good Shepherd, what say you to my soul? I believe this is one of the most important elements of us day by day, learning to allow the Lord Jesus to bring more and more into our experience his life. Because so often the voices that we've heard, they're not about life. They're not about flourishing. They're not about truth. They're about all kinds of other things, sometimes very, very hurtful things. And our great need is to say day by day, Good Shepherd, I need to hear your voice. I need to hear what you say to me. I'm your sheep. I'm one of your dear lambs, and you're my shepherd. And you've said that we listen and know your voice. I want to know your voice more and more. I want to know what you, good shepherd, have to say to me. And this is what it means to enter into this conversational relationship with God, in which we not only speak to God in prayer, but we learn in our relationship with God to hear Him and hear His voice day by day. John chapter 10 is where Jesus deals with this great image in which He declares that He is not simply the image of the Good Shepherd, He is the Good Shepherd. Now, I want to take some time just briefly this morning for us to understand this beautiful portrayal in John chapter 10, where it's located in John's Gospel during a period when Jesus is in Jerusalem. It is the Feast of Dedication of the Temple. There's a 2-month period between the Feast of Dedication and the Feast of Tabernacles. In the way that John writes, it's difficult to know exactly where a lot of these sayings of Jesus occur. John simply wants to remind us that Jesus enters Jerusalem at these high and holy days, and He is there to make a point, and the point as to who He is. He's already said in John 8, I am, period. He identifies Himself as God. He speaks of Himself as the truth, and when you know the truth will set you free. Here in John chapter 10, He speaks of Himself as the Good Shepherd. John chapter 11, He's going to say, I am resurrection and life. In John chapter 14, He's going to say, I am the true and living way to the Father. Not a true and living way, the true and living way. And these particular statements of Jesus, these amazing claims, are stated here in this particular passage, and before it and beyond it, to establish clearly for Jesus and for His audience who He is. So John chapter 10 is certainly an amazing claim. I want to make this very, very clear. In John 10, I want to read part of it for you. It begins with this, I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber. Jesus here is identifying the influence vectors and points in our lives. Your life and my life is filled with thieves and robbers. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. This is the first time in 5 occurrences where Jesus is going to refer to the listening to the voice. He calls His own sheep by name, and He leads them out. When He's brought them out all His own, He goes on ahead of them, and His sheep follow Him because they know His voice. But they'll never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from Him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but as John tells us, the people are sitting there going, Jesus, we really don't know what you're saying. So He carries on. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever come before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. But whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man who runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Jesus here is making an amazing claim that is rooted actually in an Old Testament prophetic word by Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 34, and we don't have time this morning to explore that great prophecy of Ezekiel. I encourage you sometime to sit down and read that entire chapter of Ezekiel 34. The reason Ezekiel 34 is significant is that during the Feast of Dedication, in which we believe Jesus says these things, Ezekiel 34 had been read year after year after year after year, as a prophetic word of Ezekiel spoken in the 6th century about the problem of shepherds, the problem of false shepherds, the problem of shepherds who are self-advancing, self-promoting, self-caring, but don't care for the sheep, who are there one moment and then abandon the flock. By the way, sheep and shepherds and the flock imagery is very strong for Israel in the Old Testament. It goes into the New Testament. About 100 times we find this reference or metaphor of sheep and shepherds to describe the relationship of God to his people. And Ezekiel 34 is this significant passage that was read every year. And significantly, for the last 200 years, it was read against the backdrop of what happened in the years 175 to 164 BC. Something very significant happened in Jerusalem during that period. And when you go back in history, you read the story of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was at the time the ruler of those who were opposed to all things that represented the Jewish people in Palestine. They ruled in Syria. They ruled Palestine. Antiochus Epiphanes followed a kind of Greek way of thinking in which their basic premise was this: their mission was to Greekize the world. And their particular philosophy was this: all things are to be made Greek. And all things Greek means this: man is the measure of all things. Secondly, we will determine right and wrong. That is, man will determine right and wrong. And thirdly, we are the shapers of a new future. It sounds familiar. It really reminds us there's nothing new under the sun. This kind of theme continues through human history. It's very much a part of the world today, worldview today. And the whole Greek idea was we need to get rid of the silly idea of a transcendent God. The Jews were a real problem, therefore, for Antiochus Epiphanes. They were in direct opposition. His whole premise was, how can I unite a kingdom and build a kingdom with these so-called believers in a transcendent God? Believers in a transcendent God always are a thorn in the side of secular ideologies. And so his battle from 170 BC forward was to get rid of the Jews. And so he declares war on the Jews. He attacks them. 80,000 Jews were killed in Jerusalem. The temple treasury was looted. Antiochus Epiphanes took over the temple. He set up the altar to Zeus in the Holy of Holies. The priests' rooms in the temple were turned into a brothel. A 3-year period of what was called the abomination of desecration occurred. He offered swine blood on the altar. In the mix of this, some Jewish people rose up, Judas Maccabeus being their leader. In a series of military encounters, they finally conquered the Syrians, and they drove them out. In 164 BC, the sacrifices in the temple were restored, and the temple was rededicated. So fresh in the memory of all the people in Jerusalem in Jesus' day is this idea that nearly 200 years ago, the temple was rededicated, and we got back to our anticipation for a shepherd that is to come. And every time they would gather, they would read Ezekiel 34, which also included a prophecy that reads as follows. I do want to touch in on this. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them, and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and I will rid the land of the wild beasts so that they may live in the desert and sleep in the forests in safety. I will bless them. I will send down showers in season. There shall be showers of blessing. The amazing claim in John 10 is that Jesus stands up and says, folks, I want to tell you something. I am the shepherd of nobility. I am the prince. I am the servant David, who is here to announce to you that I, as your good shepherd, lay claim to you as my own. And there are even sheep not of the flock and pasture of Israel who are also mine. Not only that, but I want you to know that I lovingly offer to give to you the gift of life. I want to give you life that is abundant. I want to give you life that is full. And to make my case for why it is that I am your good shepherd, and the good shepherd is that I will lay down my life for you. I will do what no other shepherd in Israel has ever done. I will lay down my life for you to remove all doubt as to my supremacy and sufficiency, and I will do this voluntarily, and I will do this fully. It is an amazing claim, and one of the many amazing claims that Jesus makes. I love what Lee Strobel says in his book, God's Outrageous Claims, is that one thing that Jesus cannot be is mildly important. He comes and he announces the most astounding, outrageous things, and this is why so many hated him. That's why so many opposed him, is because Jesus did not come as an answer or a solution. He did not say, I'm a good shepherd. He said, I am the good shepherd. And I've come in fulfillment of the prophecy of Ezekiel 600 years earlier. And I'm here this day to announce that I am in your presence, and you're my sheep, and I want you to hear my voice, and I want you to follow me. And from the amazing claim, there is then a profound invitation, and the invitation is simply this: come and follow me, follow my voice. Learn to hear my voice. My sheep learn to hear my voice. Now, those of us in a 21st century world, we may not fully understand how this shepherd world works, but understand the audience of Jesus' day. They lived every day surrounded by the reality of sheep and shepherds. And they knew it inside and out. When Jesus said, my sheep know my voice, they said, that's so true. Sheep know their shepherd. I read of a story recently of a fellow who found himself in an environment where in Israel he was watching in Palestine a group of shepherds. There were 3 shepherds in particular, and they brought some sheep down through a gorge, and it was this massive collection of sheep and 3 shepherds, and they all came through this gorge to an area where it then split off into various little ravines and valleys. And as he watched this, he saw these 3 shepherds, and they got down to the bottom of the gorge where the gorge branched off, and the 3 shepherds sort of greeted one another and shook hands, and then they all began to make their way along a separate valleyway, a separate gorge. After a few minutes, you notice that in the gorge there were a few sheep that were sort of just scampering around, you know how sheep do, and jumping around and not sure what to do, looking around. And then from one part of the gorge, one of the shepherds, with a very distinct call, voiced out to, no doubt, his sheep. And there were a few of these sheep down here who sort of raised their heads and then scampered up the gorge and joined the shepherd and the rest of the sheep. Then a second shepherd, with a very distinct different call, made a call, and some other sheep who were sort of lost and wondering what to do, all of a sudden raised their heads and went and followed that shepherd. Third shepherd did the same thing. Distinct call. So the people of Jesus' day would understand fully, those who have a shepherd, there's a voice print that is placed in their minds and in their souls, and they learn very quickly to recognize the voice of their shepherd. Jesus is making a case here. My invitation to you is, as my sheep, hear my voice and follow my voice and enter into this ongoing relationship with me, because my voice to you is all about life. Now, if you look at the Gospel of John and you go to John chapter 1, you'll read there John's opening prologue is this: the Word became flesh. Interesting. The Logos, a Greek idea that referred to this kind of sense that there's a wisdom that is floating out there in the universe. John dares to take that term and say the Logos is not some ethereal kind of idea of wisdom. The Word, and by the way, the Word is a communicative word. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and that Word is full of grace and truth. And this Word is the light of life. John chapter 1. If If you go to John chapter 20, verse 31, John says, I want to tell you why I wrote this record of Jesus. I have written this so that you may know Jesus, and by knowing him, believe in him, and have life in his name. Right in the middle of John's record is John 10:10. I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. The profound invitation of Jesus is, I want you as my followers to learn how to hear my voice. I am the good shepherd of your soul. I've laid down my life for you. I want you to learn to listen to my voice and follow me, and know this: the way that I'll lead you in is the way of life. Now, these days, a lot of people in our culture would look at life, and I think they would say, life is living in a state of fear a lot of days. Life is living in fear every day. Life is living in some frustration, futility every day. Life is living in fatigue every day. Take the acrostic life and you sort of can fill in the way in which a lot of people, as they look at life, they wonder, what is the key to life? And Jesus steps in as our good shepherd and says, I am the one who gives you my life so that you might have life. Listen to me. Tune your ear to me. Because my life that I give you is none of that. It is living in forgiveness every day. It is living in freedom every day. It's living in fullness every day. That's how you define life. And that life is found in the Good Shepherd. It is a profound invitation for us to enter into this ongoing relationship, and in this relationship to discover life. Now, when we think about our field of influence and so many of the voices, if you actually stop and really think and really examine and really ponder so much of what we hear, you have to, I believe we have to conclude there is so much that is anti-life these days. There is so much that brings us down, that distracts us and derails us and discourages us and confuses us. This is why we so desperately need to come back to the central tenet of our faith, and that is that we're invited to journey in relationship with Jesus day by day by day, and he is our good shepherd who loves us with an everlasting love. His grace, mercy, and peace is ours every day, and he wants us to come and primarily and dominantly know his voice above all other voices. The incredible difference that would make. And I want to close by simply giving to you an encouragement for a daily journey. And the encouragement for a daily journey is simply to think about this matter of voice navigation as a daily practice, and a daily practice in which you give to your soul a daily life-giving question. And I believe the daily life-giving question is simply this: Good Shepherd, what say you? And I believe this is a question to begin your day with. C.S. Lewis, a number of years ago, said the real problem of the Christian life and the life of faith comes where most of us don't usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. Now think about it. All of us share in common first thoughts. When you wake up each morning, what do you think of? What's the first thought? Not going to ask for testimonies this morning. Some of you, it's like, uh-oh. Not again. Oh boy. Our first thoughts are critically important. And C.S. Lewis says, the real problem of the Christian faith is when we wake up each morning. He says this: all of our wishes, all of our worries, all of our frets, all of our flurry, all the things, all of our hopes for the day and for what's ahead, they come rushing at us like wild animals. And the first job each morning is this: it's just shoving them all back. And shoving them all back, just listening to that other voice. Taking that other point of view, letting that other larger, stronger, quieter life, spiritual life come flowing in. and so on all day, standing back from all of our natural fussings and frettings and coming in out of the wind. I believe this question, and for the last little while, I have been, in my own personal journey, I have stopped in the midst of my days many times and said, Good Shepherd, what say you? And I've discovered something about the sweet and quiet voice of my Good Shepherd, that he responds to that question. I've had times when I've been in a situation where I've been working through a time of conflict, and I've paused and said, Good Shepherd, what say you? And I've heard the voice of my shepherd say, let it go. Give it to me. Other times I've been worried about things, and I've been perhaps worried about my own children and the things they're going through, and I say, Good Shepherd, what say you? And even this morning I heard him say to me, be patient. Pray for them. This question is a question that, with respect to the voices of life, I think is incredibly powerful. Some of us need to take some time with our Good Shepherd, and we need to bring into his presence the tapes that we have played for perhaps many years and say, Good Shepherd, you know I've played this over in my head over and over again of what my father said to me and about me, or what my father did not say. Good Shepherd, what say you? And to allow our Good Shepherd to speak into our lives and to voice over us his love and his grace and his mercy, and at times his clear word of what it is next for us to do with him. This is a daily journey. And that is the challenge of life, is that life is so daily. This is why Jesus said, pray every day, Father, give us today what we need. And often what we need each day is to hear in a fresh way the word of our Good Shepherd, that he does love us, that he is with us, that his grace, mercy, and peace is ever available, and to come in out of the wind, the gale force wind of all things that blow against us by way of voices. So Harvest Hills, I would encourage you as a people of God these days to so live your life day by day where this question becomes one of the key questions of your morning, your noon, your evening. You're in a meeting and some things are said and you're wondering, what do I do with this? Good Shepherd, what say you? Whisper in my ear, that quiet voice. And know this, that the Lord Jesus is faithful to guide us and direct us and to give to us the assurance of his love for us. There's no fitting thing for us to do now than to come to this table, because our Good Shepherd is present in this place, and he is voicing over us right now, and he's voicing through elements. And Pastor Myron is going to come and lead us, so I'll hand it over to him as we now continue in the presence of the one who loves us as our Good Shepherd.